so I'm going to do something a little bit different with particles. I'm going to show you guys how to have them explode. So this is really good for stuff like sparks or like goofy little water droplets or just assorted things like that. So I've gone ahead, I made an emitter. I made this a volume emitter, and I've gone ahead and scaled this with these attributes here. You don't usually want to use like the scale handles for stuff. It's like a little bit weird if you do that. And I've actually just cheated and increased gravity so these fall a little bit faster. But I'm going to show you, again, basically how to kill these on impact with this whatever boxy thing here. I'm going to do this, just so you can get a better idea of the inside of that box. So, what you want to do is go into your FX menu, nParticles, nParticle Collision Event Editor. And once you're in there, you can see a few things. So one is the nParticle. So if you're, and then you have your rigid bodies as well. So rigid bodies is going to be if, I believe this is if any particle touches that particular rigid body, do this thing. The nParticle is if a particle touches something, do this thing. So basically this is particle dependent, and this is rigid body dependent. So what I'm going to do is mess with my event name, and I'm going to say particle explode, or splide. That's going to annoy me. All right, and this is a weird menu because the create event is down here, and then there's like a bunch of new stuff here, and it's very strange. So what you can do is basically you can set this to happen on all collisions or after a specific number of collisions, I believe is what it'll do. So like I think this works as 13 collisions overall, and then it'll start doing this, but I could be wrong. Normally I do this on all collisions. And then there's different stuff you can do. So you can do emit, and this is going to make separate particle systems. So anytime one of these particles touches anything, basically, it's going to emit more particles and become its own emitter. You can also split the existing particles. I prefer to use emit. I just feel like it gives me a little bit more control over what I'm doing, but again, they work really, really similar, so it depends on what you need. So you can do random number of particles. I think if you set this to something like 3, it'll sort of give you a little bit of randomness, like between 1 and 3. I forget exactly how this works, but you have the option to do random versus a specific number of particles. And then you can do spread, which is basically, I believe, how far from the original object do you want these created. And inherent velocity is going to be, if your particles are moving quickly, is that motion transferred to the newly emitted particles, or is it just sort of assumed that they were generated from a static object in the place of this particle during a collision? You can also kill the original particle, or you can let it live. It depends on you. I'm going to kill it because I'm an evil person. Ha ha ha. Create the event. So basically, I'm treating this, again, a little bit as like a spark, where I'm basically, with these settings, recreating a split. I just have a little bit more control over it, sort of. So you can see once we create event, it's going to do this particle explode event here, and it's also made a separate particle system here. So because this is a separate particle system, it allows me to go in. Let me actually show you what this is doing really quick, because that seems helpful. So basically, as soon as these particles touch the ground, the original ones are dying or disappearing, and it's making all these goofy new dot particle things here. So we have all the same settings that we had before. You can see, again, for the particle 2, it's exactly the same as the particles that we made ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and just set these to be spheres. Particle size. I'm still going to keep these tiny just because it'll help sort of differentiate from the original particles. And also, again, I'm imagining this is like a water droplet. If it's splitting up, it does make sense they would be tinier. And I'll just make these green for the sake of demonstration. So again, let this play out. And now we have all these goofy little particles. And since they're self-colliding, there's a little bit more motion, again, obviously happening with those now. So you can do some like really interesting stuff with this. I'm going to go ahead and just make this, I'll sort of give this like a visual representation of age, I suppose. But what I'm going to do is also turn the opacity down based off age. And I'm also going to, so let me just show you what that does really quick. Sorry, I just clicked that like 8 times. So the older these get, they're going to sort of fade from existence and also become pink. However, all these particles still exist in the scene. So if we look at this, you can see the ones that were sort of shooting out. They still exist there even if you can't see them. So anytime you're doing something like that, it is a good idea to This is lifespan per particle only. I know there's settings for that, and I used to use it for stuff. I also just forget what it's for, which is kind of annoying. But what you can do is go in and sort of... I'm just going to be really lazy because I, for some reason, have issues finding settings for this at work. But you do want to kill those particles off, otherwise at some point it will start to bog down your computer. You don't really need to worry about this, because as long as it's colliding with something, those particles are going to sort of die automatically, basically. But yeah, so I mean, that's mostly like having your particles explode. So now what happens, maybe we can do something a little bit weird or different with this, and this is the part that I'm not entirely sure is going to work. So actually, I'm going to do this in a separate video. What the heck? Organization.